They thought they could get away with humiliating her. A group of boys cornered the new girl during lunch, laughed as they reached for her skirt in front of dozens of students, and treated it like a joke. But what no one knew, not the crowd filming on their phones, not the teachers who looked away, not even the grinning ringleader, was that the shy transfer student from Osaka had won back-to-back national judo titles before she even turned 16. What happened next would leave one boy flat on the pavement, another gasping for air, and an entire school silent in shock. If you've ever stayed quiet while someone was harassed, or if you've ever wished you had the courage to step in when it mattered most, this story will stay with you. Because sometimes, the strongest people aren't loud. They're the ones who wait for the right moment to make things right. On the first Monday of October, Coral Ridge High buzzed with its usual morning rituals. Cheerleaders rehearsed by the gym, athletes clogged the cafeteria with gym bags, and the rich kids glided in with iced lattes and smug confidence. But as sophomore Yumi Tanaka stepped off the school bus, there was something different in her presence. Not that anyone noticed. Her oversized hoodie, lowered gaze, and soft-spoken voice made her blend into the background. Most students assumed she barely spoke English, and a few mistook her silence for weakness. Yumi had only been in the US for 3 weeks, having moved from Japan after her father was transferred to work in corporate logistics. She didn't smile much, kept to herself, and sat alone during lunch. But underneath that shy demeanor was a girl raised by a sensei grandfather who taught her not just how to defend herself, but how to read an opponent's next move before they even twitched. Yumi had seen the looks in the hallways, the smirks, the whispered jokes, the way certain boys tried to brush against her when passing by. She had warned herself to stay quiet, to not make trouble. Her parents needed stability, and she knew one wrong move could bring unwanted attention. But it was during third period lunch, when she stood at the vending machine alone, that things escalated. She heard them behind her, loud laughs, one of them whispering something vile, and then fingers grabbing at the hem of her pleated skirt. What followed wasn't a scream. It wasn't panic. It was muscle memory. And within 5 seconds, the tables had turned. The moment her skirt was tugged, Yumi's instincts kicked in. She pivoted with fluid precision, gripping the offending wrist and twisting it just enough to make the boy yelp without breaking bone. Yet, her feet shifted automatically into stance, and with one clean motion, she used her opponent's own momentum to send him crashing onto his back. A stunned gasp swept across the outdoor lunch area as Kellen Price, the smug, varsity lacrosse captain, lay flat on the concrete, blinking up at the sky in disbelief. His designer sunglasses had flown off, and his phone clattered beside him, still recording. Before the crowd could even react, one of his wingmen, a bulky football lineman named Jason Rudd, lunged forward with a growl, fists clenched. But Yumi didn't flinch. She sidestepped, hooked her leg behind his, and used his own forward charge to flip him face first into the vending machine with a loud metallic thud. Students shouted. Phones rose like a wave, capturing the chaos. And yet, in the center of it all, Yumi remained perfectly calm, eyes sharp, stance low, fists loose and ready. The third boy, Nico Briggs, paused just a step too long. He looked at Kellen moaning on the ground, then at Jason groaning against the vending machine, and for a second, the smug grin on his face twitched. It was a joke, he stammered, hands up. We were just messing around. Yumi didn't move, but her voice, clear, firm, and not at all shy, cut through the silence. You don't get to joke with my body. Her accent was light, but her words landed heavy. Teachers rushed out seconds too late, pushing through the circle of students now whispering and pointing. Mr. Cowell, the vice principal, barked for everyone to disperse. But it was already too late. The moment had gone viral. Kellen Price, golden boy and untouchable prank king, was lying on the ground clutching his back while the new girl stood tall, not a strand of hair out of place. Yumi glanced down at her skirt, now back in place, then picked up her bag, bowed slightly, a habit from her upbringing, and walked calmly to the administration building, knowing full well she'd probably be called in. But she also knew something else. They hadn't expected her to fight back. They hadn't expected her to win. And now? Now the whole school knew she wasn't someone to corner. The front office smelled like laminate, overbrewed coffee, and nervous energy. Yumi sat across from Vice Principal Cowell, who paced like a man balancing on a tightrope. Do you know how serious this is? He said, flipping through a folder that he hadn't bothered to read. Physical altercations, student injuries, damage to school property. He paused when Yumi didn't respond. She sat upright, hands folded in her lap, calm as ever. Her silence seemed to unnerve him. Look, Yumi, he continued, lowering his voice. You're new here. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. These boys, Kellen, Jason, they're good kids. They're leaders. Sometimes their humor can be misinterpreted. Yumi raised her eyes. They tried to humiliate me. Cowell blinked, caught off guard by her firm tone. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was assault. She didn't raise her voice, but the word hit like a slap. Cowell shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We're still gathering statements. I'm sure you understand that there are procedures. Yumi didn't reply. She didn't need to. Across campus, over a dozen students had already posted the video online. It had spread like wildfire. TikToks, Reels, edits with captions like, New Girl Rex Lacrosse Captain, and Don't Mess with the Quiet Ones. Even the school's own cheerleaders were resharing it with heart emojis. By the time Cowell finished pretending to consider her suspension, the district office had already received 3 parent emails praising the girl who stood up to predatory behavior. But what Cowell didn't know, and what Yumi wasn't planning to share, was that she had seen this kind of scenario unfold before. Back in Osaka, one of her best friends had been cornered after school by 2 upperclassmen. She hadn't known how to help then. She hadn't had the skills. That helplessness had burned into her memory, and it was what pushed her to join her grandfather's judo dojo. For Yumi, fighting back wasn't about pride. It was about refusing to be powerless again. Cowell sighed and leaned back in his chair. For now, I'm placing you on a 1-day in-school suspension while we sort this out. Yumi stood. Understood. Her voice was composed. But as she turned to leave, he said, You should know this could affect your standing. The boys you threw, they're not just any students. Yumi paused, turned slightly. Neither am I. And with that, she stepped into the hallway, where students glanced at her like they were seeing her for the first time, not as some quiet foreigner, but as someone dangerous to underestimate. By the end of the school day, Yumi's name was on everyone's lips. In the hallways, the lunchroom, even whispered in faculty lounges, students talked about the ninja girl who flipped 2 jocks without breaking a sweat. Most had never spoken to her before, but now she was a campus legend. Yet while some were cheering her on, others weren't so impressed. The boys' parents, especially Kellen's, were already on damage control. His father, Nolan Price, was a real estate mogul with ties to the school board, and by 4 p.m., he was on the phone with the principal, insisting the incident had been a prank taken out of context. A prank, despite the bruises on his son's back and the video clips playing across students' phones in slow motion. Meanwhile, at home, Yumi quietly slipped into her usual evening routine. She brewed tea for her mother, helped her younger brother with algebra, and then, alone in the garage, she practiced kata beneath the single buzzing light bulb, her movements sharp and focused. It was her way of grounding herself. The fame didn't interest her. What bothered her more was how quickly the administration wanted to dismiss what happened. The next morning, she returned to school and found her locker had been decorated. Bright sticky notes with phrases like Queen of Throws and hashtag Justice Judo, but also others with mocking remarks. Try that on someone real, one note sneered. Another simply said, Go back home. She peeled them off one by one, neither smiling nor reacting. But she noticed something else. How some students gave her nods of respect, how others gave her a wide berth, and how Kellen and his crew weren't in class. Word was they were recovering at home. Yet the silence didn't last long. That afternoon, someone made an anonymous post on the school's forum. A grainy clip of Yumi flipping Jason with a mocking caption. Is violence the new feminism? The comments exploded with debates. Some praised her. Others defended the boys. A few even questioned if she should be expelled. Yumi scrolled through them in silence. She knew this was bigger than a school fight now. It was about reputation, control, and who got to define the narrative. That night, she began writing a statement. Not a defense, but a declaration. She wasn't going to fade into the background again. She'd done that before, and all it had ever brought was silence. This time, the world was watching, and she wasn't going to flinch. By midweek, the school board scheduled a disciplinary hearing behind closed doors, except everyone knew what it really was. a chance to appease the powerful families fuming over their son's public humiliation. Yumi was asked to attend, not to give her side of the story, but to sit quietly while district officials reviewed behavioral concerns. They framed it as protocol. She saw it for what it was, a warning. When she arrived, her guidance counselor gave her a sympathetic look but offered no support. Across the table sat Principal Hendricks, Vice Principal Cowell, and two school board members, both white men in polished suits who barely glanced at her as they shuffled papers. "This incident has drawn quite a bit of attention," one of them began. "And while we understand tensions were high, we want to ensure all students feel safe and respected." Yumi kept her expression neutral, but her mind sharpened like a blade. Safe and respected? That hadn't seemed to matter when Kellen grabbed at her skirt. It only became a concern when she defended herself. "Do the boys also have to attend this meeting?" she asked. "Or just the girl who fought back?" That earned her a pause. Principal Hendricks cleared his throat. "The boys are recuperating. Given the injuries sustained while assaulting someone," she cut in. Her voice was steady, but there was fire underneath. "I didn't escalate. I ended it." The men shifted uncomfortably, and Cowell jumped in to defuse. "Yumi, we're not here to argue. We just want to avoid further incidents. Maybe consider adjusting how you handle conflict." She blinked. "You mean not protect myself?" Silence. One of the board members finally said, "Let's take a short break." As they filed out, Yumi remained seated, jaw tight. She had never asked to be a symbol. She hadn't come to Coral Ridge High to fight battles. But the system had made its priorities clear: shield the sons of donors, silence the inconvenient girl. As she waited alone in the conference room, her phone buzzed. It was a message from a student she didn't know. "Thank you for what you did. My sister went through something similar last year." No one believed her. Yumi stared at the message, her hands suddenly trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. Maybe this wasn't just her fight anymore. Maybe it never had been. Maybe she was just the first one trained enough and brave enough to flip the script. Literally. The next morning, the hallway buzzed differently. Not with the usual teenage drama or test anxiety, but with quiet tension, like the eye of a storm holding its breath. Posters had appeared overnight, tacked to bulletin boards and lockers, printed in bold. "Self-defense is not aggression. Protecting yourself is not a crime." No one claimed credit, but Yumi had a feeling it wasn't random. The message matched her words from the hearing almost exactly. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't alone. A few students nodded at her as she passed, quiet acknowledgments of support. In history class, someone slid her a folded note. "They've messed with the wrong girl." But support wasn't universal. Kellen was back, bruised ego hidden behind a smug expression, his hand wrapped in a soft brace like a war medal. He walked with exaggerated confidence, his usual entourage trailing behind him, tossing glances that weren't exactly subtle. At lunch, he passed her table and said loud enough for nearby students to hear, "Careful, everyone. She might flip the whole cafeteria next." Laughter followed, forced hollow. Yumi didn't even blink. But that evening, it got worse. An anonymous account on the school's student forum posted a blurry photo of Yumi from behind, tagging it with, "Surprised she wears a skirt at all after what happened." Maybe she wanted attention. The comments that followed were vicious. Cruel jokes, racist jabs, accusations masked as humor. Some students reported it. Others shared it. But Yumi didn't log off. Instead, she posted a reply under her real name. One sentence: "If you think I deserved it, say it to my face." Within minutes, the post blew up. Dozens of replies followed, most in support. And then, quietly, unexpectedly, other students began sharing their own stories. A junior described a time she was cornered at a football game. Another girl mentioned being slapped with a "just a joke" defense after a boy pulled her hijab in gym class. One by one, the silence was cracking. Yumi hadn't asked for this spotlight. But now that it was here, she wasn't stepping out of it. That night, she received another message, this one from Coach Herrera, the school's judo instructor. He had seen the video. He'd also seen her form. "We have a team," the message read. "I think you'd be a perfect fit." Yumi stared at it for a long moment, then typed back 2 words, "I'm in." If they wanted to paint her as the dangerous girl, the fighter, then fine. Let them. She would show them exactly how powerful that title could be. By Friday, the energy on campus had shifted completely. What began as a viral fight clip was now a full-blown reckoning. A petition had circulated demanding the administration revise its disciplinary policies for harassment and retaliation. Over 700 signatures in 2 days. Students who'd once laughed or stayed silent now stood beside Yumi in subtle but powerful ways, wearing red ribbons on their wrists, the color of her old judo belt. Slipping post, it's on bathroom mirrors reading, "Strength isn't violence. Silence is." But the administration? Still silent. Cowell avoided her in the halls. Principal Hendricks hadn't spoken publicly once. Meanwhile, the boys who had attacked her, the self-proclaimed kings of Coral Ridge, were back to whispering behind closed doors. Yumi heard rumors that Kellen's father had hired a PR consultant, that someone had tried to get the videos scrubbed from social media. But they couldn't erase what had already ignited. On the surface, Kellen tried to act unaffected. He cracked jokes, bragged about almost suing, and posted throwback photos to his lacrosse wins. But under the surface, cracks were showing. His crowd was thinning. People weren't laughing as loud, and some weren't laughing at all. That afternoon, he passed her again in the hallway. "Hope you're enjoying your 15 minutes, he sneered. "It won't last." Yumi didn't stop walking. "Neither will your protection." It wasn't a threat, it was a fact, because something else had shifted. Coach Herrera invited her to the judo gym that evening to observe the varsity team. When she arrived, the room was quiet except for the soft slap of bare feet on mats. Students bowed, trained, and moved with a rhythm Yumi hadn't felt since she left Japan. When Coach introduced her, the room stilled. "This is Yumi Tanaka," he said. "She's joining the team. Be warned, she's got better footwork than most of you." A few chuckled. One boy whispered, "The skirt girl?" Yumi stepped onto the mat. "You can just call me Yumi." By the end of the night, she'd sparred with 3 upper belts, flipping 2, pinning the 3rd. No spectacle, no crowd, just her reclaiming the space on her own terms. After practice, as she slipped on her shoes, Coach Herrera placed a folded uniform in her hands. "This school likes to forget that real strength comes with discipline," he said. "Remind them." Yumi nodded. It wasn't about revenge. It was about resetting the standard. She didn't want power for herself. She wanted others to know they had it too. And she was just getting started. The following week brought the school's annual Spirit Assembly, an overhyped spectacle usually reserved for honoring sports teams, handing out hollow awards, and letting rich kids parade across the gym floor like royalty. Yumi had never planned on attending. But this year, things were different. Whispers had already spread. Kellen was going to set the record straight with a speech, spinning the incident into a misunderstood prank gone wrong. The narrative was being rewritten in real time, and Yumi could feel the ground shifting under her again. Coach Herrera noticed her tension during morning practice. "He talks," he said, taping his wrist, "but you move. Don't forget that." When the time came, the gymnasium overflowed with students, staff, and a few strategically seated parents, like it always did. Banners waved. The cheer squad performed. And then Kellen took the mic, fake humility dripping off him like cologne. "We all make mistakes," he began. "And sometimes they're caught in the worst light." The crowd was divided. Some clapped. Others just stared. Yumi stood in the back, hands folded in her hoodie pocket. Then he said it. "I never meant to scare or disrespect anyone. If it came across that way, I'm sorry for the confusion." Confusion? The word rang in her ears like a slap. That was his apology? That he was misunderstood? The same boy who grabbed at her skirt now wanted to be seen as a victim of optics? A few students glanced toward Yumi. She didn't move, but her stillness was louder than any speech. Then something unexpected happened. Principal Hendricks invited a few members of the student body to speak about school culture and safety, probably expecting a few lines from the student council. But then a sophomore stood up. Emma Hernandez. Soft-spoken. Theater kid. "Last year," she said, "someone pulled on my hoodie so hard I choked. I didn't say anything because I thought I'd get laughed at." She glanced at Yumi. "But now, I know I should have." The room went silent. Then another student stood. And another. Stories poured out, quiet, raw, honest. No one mentioned Yumi directly, but her presence anchored them all. When the microphone finally came her way, she didn't hesitate. "Self-defense," she said, her voice steady, "is not aggression. Being quiet doesn't mean I don't have a voice. It just means I waited for the right time to use it." She handed the mic back and walked off the gym floor. No bow. No dramatic exit. Just truth. And this time, no one dared to look away. That night, the video of Yumi's short speech, barely 30 seconds long, circulated faster than any of the previous fight clips. Except this time, it wasn't about spectacle. It was about substance. Students shared it with captions like, "Finally, someone said it," and "The silence is broken." Even parents began commenting, not just about Yumi, but about the school's failure to take past complaints seriously. The administration, previously content to ignore the momentum, suddenly found itself cornered. By Wednesday, Principal Hendricks issued a formal statement about revisiting campus harassment policies and committing to a safer environment for all students. But it wasn't enough. Students wanted action. Teachers who had seen the patterns for years began quietly backing the student movement. A school-wide town hall was scheduled. News outlets picked up the story, at first local, then regional. The headline that stuck was simple: Teen Judo Champion flips more than bullies. She's flipping the culture. Meanwhile, Kellen's father pulled strings to suppress the worst of the PR fallout. But no spin could undo what was now immortalized on social media. The moment his son tried to shame a girl and ended up flat on his back, and the follow-up where that same girl, standing calmly in front of an entire gymnasium, reminded everyone what real strength looked like. Kellen stopped showing up to class soon after. Rumors swirled: withdrawal, private tutor, damage control. But no official word was given. No apology either. And Yumi? She just kept showing up. To class. To practice. To the dojo on weekends, where Coach Herrera had started offering free self-defense sessions for any students who wanted to join. Dozens showed up. Girls, boys, even a few teachers. Yumi helped lead drills. She didn't lecture or preach. She simply showed how to stay grounded, how to control fear, how to fight smart. Her voice was rarely the loudest in the room, but it didn't need to be. One afternoon, as she left the gym, she found a note taped to her locker. Handwritten, no name. "My little sister saw the video. She wants to join judo now. Thank you." Yumi smiled, not broadly, but softly, inwardly. The kind of smile that knew it wasn't over, but something had shifted. The story had moved beyond her. She had started it with a throw, but others were now carrying it forward. In every truth told, every posture held, every skirt walked down the hallway without fear. And that was the real victory. Months later, Coral Ridge High was no longer the same school Yumi had walked into on that October morning. Posters now lined the halls promoting consent, boundaries, and student-led equity workshops. The once silent victims of harassment, those who had spent years laughing along or keeping their heads down, had found a voice through her courage. And while many still whispered about the fight, it wasn't the flips they remembered most. It was the way Yumi stood her ground, unshaken, calm, and unapologetically present. A new judo club was officially formed with Yumi as co-captain, and by spring, they competed in their first district tournament, earning second place and community-wide recognition. Principal Hendricks announced his resignation at the end of the year, his tone clipped and rehearsed, citing health and family priorities. But everyone knew the pressure came from parents and students who had demanded accountability after years of passive leadership. Meanwhile, Kellen Price was quietly transferred to a private academy out of state, his name never mentioned again in morning announcements or on the school's sports banners. His fall from grace wasn't a spectacle. It was a quiet erasure, the kind people pretended had always been there. But Yumi didn't celebrate that. She wasn't interested in his downfall. Her focus had always been about something greater, making sure no one else had to fight that hard to simply feel safe. She still wore her hoodie most days, still walked alone by choice, still spoke only when she had something worth saying. But now, when she entered a room, people looked up, not in fear, not in awe, but in respect. And that meant everything. The media coverage faded. The hashtag slowed. But the ripple effect didn't stop. Younger students wrote essays about her for Women's History Month. Local martial arts studios saw enrollment spikes. And every time Yumi passed a student sitting alone or watched someone flinch when a crowd got too loud, she saw pieces of her past self, and gently, quietly, she offered them space. Her story wasn't about revenge. It was about rewriting the rules, about what it means to be strong in a world that often tries to define you before you've spoken. And in a gymnasium where the balance of power had once tilted toward the loudest voices, a single girl, small, silent, unshakable, had reset the scale. Not with fury, but with focus. Not for fame, but for freedom. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens or speeches. Sometimes it comes in the form of a clean, silent throw and the courage to never walk away again.